Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the talk show. Today, we're going to get into my reactions to the NFL Divisional round, talk about the national championship, and my predictions for the conference championship games. So, let's get into it. My wide receiver winners, first game, Chiefs-Texans. This game was close, not super surprised by that. It was close in the regular season. I thought the Chiefs would win, but it was pretty close. First of all, I want to address the two penalties in the game that a lot of people are talking about. Do I personally think they were penalties? No, obviously not. I think that, especially in that game, was a big issue, and I think they need to kind of lock down on that and make sure calls like that aren't happening. But getting to the stats, the Chiefs had 8 sacks that game, and realistically, if you give up 8 sacks in a game, you should never win. And to highlight, George Karlaftis in those 8 sacks had 3 of them, so good game by him. But ultimately, you can't give up 8 sacks and fully expect to win. Travis Kelce had 7 receptions, 117 yards, and a touchdown. He had 117 of Mahomes, 177 passing yards. So then again, probably one of his best games of the season. Can't leave him open 7 times like that and expect to win. Now, I will say this was a very good defensive game by the Chiefs. The Chiefs had 253 total yards of offense, while the Texans had 400. Stroud had 245 passing yards. Mixon had 88 yards and a touchdown. Nico Collins, 5 receptions, 81 yards. So the Texans played well, but I will say it come down to the big-time sacks. There's a big sack on 4th down, big sacks on 3rd down, and Kyrie Fairbairn went 2 for 4 on field goals. 1 was blocked, and 0 for 1 on extra points. So that's 7 points right there that were just left on the board, and you make those, it's a completely different game. So, I mean, looking back on that game, obviously those 2 penalties helped the Chiefs, but I don't think they were the deciding factor in the Chiefs winning that game. Next game, Commanders-Lions. This game shocked me. I really thought the Lions were going to pull it out. I thought the Lions were going to have the biggest margin of victory between the two teams, but just didn't go that way. Jaden Daniels just continues to impress in the playoffs. He went 22 for 31, 299 passing yards and 2 touchdowns. And De'Ami Brown and Terry McLaurin combined for 10 receptions, 185 yards, and a touchdown. And this just kind of goes to show, last week in the wild card round, Jaden Daniels went 24 for 35, 268, and 2 touchdowns. And just to compare, in Lamar's first 2 playoff games, he went 14 for 19, 194, 2 touchdowns and a pick, and 31 for 59, 365 yards, 1 touchdown and 2 picks. And in Josh Allen's first playoff game, he went 24 for 46, 264, no touchdowns, no picks. So just kind of show comparing him to some of the best quarterbacks in the league, and he's already there in the playoffs. Now over to the Lions. Jared Goff, 23 for 40, 313, 1 touchdown and 3 interceptions, had 4 turnovers just from him alone, which, as a quarterback, especially in the division round of the playoffs, that can't happen if you want to win. Had a pick 6, had a 1 pick in the end zone, which could have been a touchdown. Instead, it was a turnover. And then Jameson Williams had an interception that kind of, in a way, felt like it sealed the game for them. Not really sure about that play call being down what they were, but nonetheless, very surprising game, especially now with the Lions losing a lot of their assistant coaches. So it'll be interesting to see how they are next year. Looking at Rams-Eagles, I definitely think the weather played an impact in this game. It favored the Eagles. The Eagles are one of the better run teams in the league, especially in the second half. Definitely played a factor, but Saquon, 26 carries, 205 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Went for 200 plus both times he played the Rams this year. Hurts went 15 for 20, 128 and no touchdowns, but had 7 rushing attempts, 70 yards and a touchdown, with the 44-yard rushing touchdown. So that was big by him. to be able to use him in the run game too. A.J. Brown only had 7 targets and 2 receptions, so I think he's going to have to step it up, especially in the conference championship. But they had 3 fumble recoveries, which changes field position, especially in a weather like this when you can't really throw, is huge. And their defense just came up in big moments at the end of the game, forcing turnovers. Just a big game by them. But, I mean, the Rams played great. Stafford, 26 for 44, 324, 2 touchdowns. Kyron Williams, 19 attempts, 106 yards. Puka Nacua almost had 100 yards receiving. So it was a close game. Only lost by 6. I think if the weather wasn't a factor, who knows what would have happened. But nonetheless, the Eagles won, and they moved on. In the last game, Bills-Ravens, obviously, the Mark Andrews drop at the end of the game was crucial for the team, detrimental. But Lamar also had 2 turnovers. He had 2 careless turnovers, I'd say. 1 interception that wasn't really close to Rashad Bateman, and then the fumble, which I think led to a Buffalo touchdown. So not the best first half for Lamar. Kind of got them down to a 21-7 deficit. But in the second half, their run game started to pick up, started scoring, brought it back. And one thing I'll say, I wasn't a fan of how the Bills called the second half. I know they were up 21-7, but there's a lot of runs and short passes that didn't really get anywhere. And I think only being down 14 in the NFL, that can happen in a matter of seconds. So I don't like how they kind of let their foot off the gas super early in the second quarter. I would have liked them to try and get the lead to maybe 28-7 or even 31-7 before they fully started just kind of trying to run the clock out, especially against someone like Lamar who is as dynamic as he is. I would have liked them to do that, but they got the win, and they're going to face the Chiefs again. Next up, for this little intermission, we'll get to the national championship. Final score was 34-23. I thought it was going to be 31-17, so I thought it'd be 14 points. It was 11. Not too crazy, but starting off that game, Notre Dame's 18-play, 75-yard drive that ended in a touchdown, taking up 10 minutes of clock. I think that was smart by them. I think everyone knew their strength was running the ball, so for them to do that well and take the clock off of Ohio State, who has the best offense in the country, I think was smart. But it didn't stay like that. Their next 2 drives after that, 6 plays, -4 yards, and 2 punts. So 2 straight 2-and-outs when Ohio State had their first 3 drives resulted in 3 touchdowns. And that whole first half, really, Will Howard, 14 for 15, 144, and 2 touchdowns. Just, like going through his reads, making the right throws, which isn't necessarily hard with that team, but obviously a great game. And then to start off the second half, Judkins has a 70-yard run, which results in another touchdown, taking it 28-7. It kind of looked over at this point. Notre Dame still not being able to do much on offense, but the Emeka Egbuka fumble kind of shifted momentum towards Notre Dame, go down and score. Kind of start bringing the lead back, but ultimately Ohio State held them off. Will Howard finished with 231 yards passing. 87 of that came in the second half, but 56 of that 87 was from 1 throw to Jeremiah Smith. So he really only had 31 yards in the second half. And this kind of goes to what I was just saying about the Bills. I think they kind of laid off the gas too early. And I know that fumble hurt them, but I feel like 28-7, who knows, you get a turnover like they did, and it's just back. So I think I'd want to be up by a little more than that before I start running the clock too. But they ultimately won. Big turnaround from the loss to Michigan. I didn't think they were going to win the national championship. I didn't know how mentally they'd be after that game, but impressive playoff run. One of the most dominant ones I've ever seen. Obviously not as dominant as LSU, for being honest here, but impressive win by them, and they have some players returning next season, so that should be exciting as well. And finally, to get into the conference championship week, we're going to start off with the 3 o'clock game. Eagles Commanders. In their first meeting this season, the Eagles won 26-18. Jane Daniels had only 191 passing yards, a touchdown, and a pick. Austin Eckler was their leading receiver with 8 receptions and 89 yards. And Saquon had 26 carries, 146, and 2 touchdowns. So a pretty average game for Saquon. That's kind of to be expected to happen, but I think with the Commanders, you got to get Brown and McLaurin involved this game. You can't have Austin Eckler as your leading receiver if you want to beat a team like the Eagles. In the second meeting, Jalen Hurts got injured early in the game, concussion, which had Kenny Pickett come in. The Commanders won this game, I believe 34-35, something close like that. Jane Daniels, 258 yards, 5 touchdowns, 2 picks. I believe he led the team in rushing yards, 9 receptions, 81 yards. Brian Robinson only had 24 yards on 10 carries and 2 fumbles. So I know they had 5 turnovers that game. Barkley had 29 carries, 150 yards, and 2 touchdowns. So once again, pretty similar to the game before. I think if the Commanders, or if Jalen Hurts plays, they win that game. So 5 turnovers is costly, obviously. That can't happen in any playoff game, as we saw from the Lions. Look at the stats. A third of Jaden Daniels' interceptions in the regular season came from playing the Eagles. So I wouldn't necessarily say I expect one, but I wouldn't be surprised if they get some turnovers in this game. But the way he's been playing in the playoffs this year has a total of 70% completion percentage, 567 yards, 4 passing touchdowns, and no picks. He's had a lot of crucial runs to get first down, to keep a drive going against the Lions and Buccaneers. And then McLaurin and De'Ami Brown, pretty similar, 11 receptions. McLaurin has 176 to Brown's 187, but McLaurin has 2 touchdowns to Brown's 1 pick, so very similar. Both stepped up in the playoffs to help them out. When you look at the Eagles, Barkley in his playoffs has 51 carries, 324 yards, and 2 touchdowns. He's averaging 162 rushing yards per game. He's obviously the focal point of their offense, and I'd expect him to have another 150-yard game. It's more just if you allow a lot more than that, you can be in trouble. Jalen Hurts was seen walking gingerly with an ankle injury, so that should be something to look out for. And with that, I'd expect him to pass more. But A.J. Brown, 10 targets, only 3 receptions for 24 yards, so he's going to have to step it up if they want to win. He's the best receiver on the team, and in conference championship games like this, they have to perform. Dallas Goedert, their leading receiver, 8 receptions, 103 yards, and a touchdown. He didn't practice for 2 days with a neck injury, so we'll see how that was. He was a full participant on Friday, and he's ready to go for the game, but they're all going to have to step up. Devontae Smith's been playing well, Goddard obviously, but yeah, I'm picking the Eagles to win this. I just think when they're able to fire on all cylinders, I think they're the best team in football. They have the most dominant team in football, and I think without injuries, this is the best defense Jaden Daniels is going to play in the playoffs. I think it'll probably be close like all the other games, inside 10 points, but home field advantage too. I'm taking the Eagles. And lastly, the game I think almost everyone is most excited for the 4th time in the playoffs. We have Chiefs-Bills. When they played Week 11, Mahomes went 23 for 33, 196, 3 touchdowns, and 2 interceptions. Allen went 27 for 40, 262, 1 touchdown and a pick. And I remember I rewatched this game. Amari Cooper, 2 receptions, 55 yards, but that was a 30-yarder and a 25-yard reception. So he made some big plays in that game. Hasn't been super productive on the Bills, but since that game, Mahomes hasn't had an interception in 7 weeks. His last interception was against the Bills, though, with 2 interceptions. And since Week 8, in those 10 games, he's had 2,454 yards, 19 touchdowns, and no interceptions. So since that Bills game, no interceptions. He's been playing at a different level. Obviously, this is Mahomes in the playoffs. He's already playing at a different level. And we look at these defenses. This Chiefs defense averages 101 rushing yards per game, which for the Bills, that's their highest. That's their best form of offense. So I think if they're able to hold the Bills to 100 rushing yards, that could favor the Chiefs. But this Bills defense is the highest turnover differential, 32 to 8, so plus 24, as we could see by getting Mahomes to turn the ball over. But I mean, looking at this in the playoffs, Josh Allen against playoff teams this season, he played 5 of them, had 1,277 passing yards, 7 touchdowns, 1 interception, and 6 rushing touchdowns. In the first 2, he struggled, 42.6% completion percentage combined, but in the last 3, he picked it up, 64.9% completion percentage. And then we just look at, Mahomes in the playoffs. 19 games, 5,312 yards, 42 touchdowns, and 8 interceptions. So against the Bills in the last 3 games, 918 passing yards, 8 passing touchdowns, no interceptions, and he's been 3-0. And then that's paired with Travis Kelce, who with 19 games with Mahomes has 149 receptions, 1,726 yards, and 19 touchdowns, and he has the playoff record in receptions, and he's second in yards. And against the Bills in the playoffs, 25 receptions, 289 yards, and 5 touchdowns. So this game is super interesting for me. We have the Bills, Josh Allen in one of his best seasons. And one of the things I like about this team is, obviously we know how Kelce plays in the playoffs, but other than him, there really isn't any necessarily superstars on the Chiefs roster other than Mahomes. Their defense has Chris Jones, but once again, not a lot of necessarily superstars. Same with the Bills. So I think this game will be super interesting. I think for the Chiefs, they need to establish James Worthy, Hollywood Brown, all of the receivers around Kelce, because I'd expect the Bills to primarily focus on Kelce and are going to say, you need to beat us with these other players. I think James Worthy has improved, or Xavier Worthy, has improved a lot throughout the season. So I'd expect him to have a big game, probably closer to 100 yards. Hollywood Brown, he's been in the system. He's been getting used to it. I'd expect to have a big game from him. I would expect some deep shots that they're going to try and take on this Bills secondary. And I think you got to get Kelce involved regardless, because him in the playoffs, he's been unstoppable in the playoffs. And then for the Bills, I'd say you need to establish the run game early, and you need to get the receivers working too. I don't think the Chiefs' secondary is necessarily special. I think that's how you beat them. So you got to get Curtis Samuel, Amari Cooper, all of them in it too. But I think you have to do that after establishing a solid run game, because that's what's worked for them the whole season. For the Chiefs, I think you have to focus more on not letting Allen scramble more than trying to pressure him. I know Spagnuolo's a big pressure guy, but as we saw in the last game, almost had him for a sack. Josh Allen gets away, breaks it, runs it for a touchdown, which really sealed the game. So I think you need to worry about not letting him escape and staying in the pocket and trusting your secondary. And for the Bills, I think, like I said, you kind of just got to try and take Kelce out of the game, make Mahomes beat you with Worthy, with Brown, with Hopkins, and ultimately just not let them get the run game going. It doesn't really get going a lot, but if you can just stop that and make them have to pass, I think that's their key to victory. But, I watched some Chiefs playoff games recently. I watched the Bills game, I watched the Ravens game, I watched their 2 Super Bowls, and after really watching them, it feels like the Chiefs should never win. It feels like, they should never win, but they always do. And until I'm really proven wrong, I'll never bet against Mahomes. So I'm taking the Chiefs to win by 7 or less. It's going to be a super close game, I think, but I just think the Chiefs are going to pull away with it. And lastly, the last segment, we're going to go wide receiver winners. All 3 are from the same game this week. I'm going to be first Jeremiah Smith, one of the best true freshman seasons I've ever seen. in this game, national championship, 5 receptions, 88 yards and a touchdown. Obviously had the dagger, 56-yard reception. And really just the whole playoffs just took a step, from the Tennessee game and the Oregon game, 2 of his best games of the season. Was the decoy against Texas, which opened up the game for other people. And I think, obviously, you guys know how big of a fan I have of Marvin Harrison, but I do think he can be the best receiver in Ohio State history, and I genuinely think he could be the first pick in the draft in 2 years. Next up, Emeka Egbuka, 6 receptions and 64 yards in the national championship, which got him to be Ohio State's leading all-time receptions leader. One of the more underrated receivers there, overshadowed by Chris Olave and Garrett Wilson, then to Marvin Harrison, and now to Jeremiah Smith. But I think he's the best receiver in this upcoming draft class. I'm excited to see what he does, and ultimately a big accomplishment to be the receptions leader at a school like Ohio State, especially for receivers. And last was Jaden Greathouse, 6 receptions, 128 yards, and 2 touchdowns. He was the spark that brought them back into this game, got their 2 touchdowns in the second half. He had the second most yards against Ohio State this year, 3rd player with 100-plus yards, so that's a positive that Notre Dame has coming back to next season. But those are 3 wide receivers, and yeah, thank you for watching.